All right, switching gears a little bit here in the Action News 5 digital desk. We've been talking about the month of May being Mental Health Awareness Month. We are joined now by Renee Dillard. She is Methodist Le Bonheur's Director of Employee Assistance, and she's going to talk to us about taking small steps each day to improve our overall mental health. Renee, good morning to you. Tell me, if someone is watching us right now, we have thousands that are online watching us, what would be some place to begin, or maybe a checklist to kind of say, okay, I need to address my mental health? Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be with you today, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this topic. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, which is a renewed opportunity for us to really deepen our awareness around mental health and to do some work to continue to decrease maybe the stigma or the resistance to accessing mental health, even when we need it. So I really appreciate this question of what is it that we would be looking for? How would we know that maybe it's time to reach out for some additional support? I think some of the basic things to pay attention to would be, first of all, any changes in sleep and appetite, any changes in our mood. It's a normal, natural reaction for us to be stressed and anxious during really difficult times when we have a lot on our plate. I think, though, if those anxious thoughts persist, or perhaps a lower mood of depression, and we find ourselves beginning to isolate, and maybe it's difficult to meet our responsibilities, function well at work, maybe it's impacting our relationships. These are some of the signs to be watching for, so that we know that, yes, this is the time that I can remember that something's going on and I do not have to handle this all by myself. There are resources and helps available.
Okay, so now that we've identified that, and I think, you know, anything to come out of the pandemic when it comes to mental health is one of the few things positive, I guess you could say, out of the pandemic, is this focus on making sure our mental health is good and straight and above average. And so if we identify that perhaps maybe we have a problem, what are some steps, some guidelines, maybe bullet points that we can do to really kind of get us back into feeling more like ourselves?
It's important to begin with the foundation. Just a reality of being human is that we have particular needs. The good news is that some of the practices that we know are good for our physical health are also good for our mental health. So I always think it's important to begin with the foundation. Are we getting enough sleep? Are we eating some good, nutritious food? Are we drinking water? Are we having some sort of movement or exercise that we are weaving into our daily or weekly life? And one of the foundations for good self-care that is sometimes overlooked is that part of being human is also that we are built for connection. And so are we prioritizing time with family and friends? Are we focusing on the relationships where there is good mutual support, so that we're not always the one giving in the relationship and we're not always the one receiving in the relationship? So that's kind of the foundation for me for good self-care and taking care of ourselves in body, mind, and spirit. Beyond that foundation, I think there are some really interesting practices that we can weave in really small ways, and yet they have a large impact. One is simply to recognize the emotional part of who we are. Sometimes our tendency is that because some of those feelings are uncomfortable, when we are worried or scared or really sad or angry even, is that we tend to tuck all of that away. And again, emotions are simply part of being human, and eventually we can tuck those away for a little while and that'll work, but they're going to come out one way or another, maybe with some irritability, again, some impact on our relationships. And sometimes holding all that in can begin to impact our physical health in some detrimental ways as well. So it helps to just put language to what we're feeling, simply name it for what it is and kind of give ourselves some permission to feel it. And that alone sometimes will give those emotions a little bit of room to move. And then we can kind of deal with that and be on our way.
I totally agree. I mean, I love what you brought up, you know, just kind of like mindfulness, eat well, get some sunlight, spend time in nature, you know, these types of things, set out a connection, plenty of sleep. Let's say someone who's watching right now has done all those things and they are saying, you know what, Renee, I still don't feel myself. I still don't feel like I am back to where I used to be. What do you tell that person? At what point do we say, maybe I should see a professional?
I appreciate that question, and it gives me an opportunity to clarify that a lot of these practices do not make the stressors in our life go away. Sometimes we are really in the midst of some heavy grief and loss in our life, and so these practices will not necessarily diminish that. They can help us continue to move forward in the midst of challenging times, helping us to be a little more centered, a little more grounded, even as we're carrying what feels like a heavy weight for many of us at this particular season. If you find that these kind of practices, beginning to prioritize a little bit of self-care, making sure that this foundation is in place, and as you've said, even then, your mood is still not where it typically would be or where you would want it to be, you're still having these impacts in your life, that's the time to reach out for some help. Again, it's important to remember that you do not have to walk through that alone. We have some tremendous resources available. One great resource through Methodist Healthcare is the Dennis H. Jones Living Well Network, and that's a connecting resource. So anyone can call the Dennis H. Jones Living Well Network at 762-8558 and speak with a mental health provider, have a phone consultation, and then that provider can connect the caller with whatever the appropriate resource is in the community. So that's a tremendous way to make that first call, get connected somewhere, and take that next step toward really fostering good mental health in our lives.
988, that is another one. That's a hotline that's 24/7, right? And do they do the same thing?
So the 988 number is a tremendous resource as well. If anyone listening now or perhaps pulling this up later is in a moment of crisis, you can call or text 988 and speak with someone right away. If you're having thoughts of suicide, thoughts of harming yourself, or in any kind of mental health crisis, 988 is an immediate access to speak with someone.
Renee, we've hit on a bunch of topics. Anything else you want to mention before we let you go?
Never underestimate the power of a good deep breath, or perhaps just a stretch. I know it may seem, if you're in an office with other people, it may seem uncomfortable, but just stretching and coming back into ourself and into the moment, and a good deep breath can again help keep us centered and grounded, even in the midst of all that is going on around us.
All good points there. Renee Dillard, Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare Director of Employee Assistance, mental health. We got to protect it. We got to make sure it's at optimal levels. We appreciate your discussion. Again, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Appreciate it, Renee. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you. Have a great day.